It's never the loud betrayals that break us first. It's the quiet ones, the ones hiding in plain sight, dressed as routine. Billionaire forgot to log out of his email. His pregnant wife saw the itinerary for two. A flight itinerary sitting innocently on a computer screen can shatter an entire world when Sophie Caldwell, 5 months pregnant and already anxious about the changes looming over her life, discovered an unexpected trip set for two under her husband Adrian's name. She felt her heart slam against her ribs. Her hands shook. 2 tickets, 1 hotel reservation, 2 passports needed. But why was only his name and a stranger's on the confirmation email? It had to be a mistake. She told herself that, yet the gnawing in her gut wouldn't quit. From that moment, her once blissful reality spiraled into a tangled web of secrets and danger. Sophie Caldwell still remembered the first time she laid eyes on her husband Adrian. It was at a charity fundraiser in Chicago, a black tie event for a youth education foundation. The night had been thick with glamour. From the iced champagne to the clink of diamond bracelets on the wrists of the Midwest's elite. Sophie had attended as an up-and-coming interior designer from a modest Minneapolis background, standing awkwardly among crowds discussing lakefront homes in Wisconsin and new lines of Italian suits. In the center of it all was Adrian Caldwell, a tall, meticulously groomed entrepreneur with broad shoulders, quick wit, and a luminous watch that caught the light every time he casually flipped his wrist. Rumor around the room was that he was worth more than many of the other donors combined, having sold a logistics software firm for an eye-popping sum before turning 32. He was older than her by nearly 10 years, yet he possessed a boyish smile that made him appear refreshingly approachable. She thought it was odd that such a serious man, featured in Forbes, spotted at exclusive luncheons with corporate titans, could stand so comfortably among gossip and laughter. That night, Adrian had plucked a flute of champagne off a passing tray and handed it to Sophie with a grin. Something about the way he did it, like he'd known her for years, kindled warmth in her cheeks. She barely realized that, in handing her that single glass, he'd broken the ice. They ended up talking for hours about his travels in South America, her favorite gallery installations, his philanthropic dreams, and her quiet hopes to launch her own boutique firm one day. He had that intangible quality that made you feel entirely seen. By the time the night ended, Sophie was convinced she'd glimpsed a more generous heart behind the tailored exterior. Their courtship was the stuff of modern fairy tales. Adrian flew Sophie to Barcelona on their 3rd date, not to impress, but to indulge her passion for architecture. He showered her with gifts, sure, but he also nurtured her ambitions. He introduced her to influential clients, sent her business leads, and encouraged her to push past her comfort zone. Their life together felt like a dream. Yet even in a fairy tale, darkness lurks in the corners. Adrian had always maintained his private side. Unexplained phone calls that left him brooding, whispered meetings with lawyers in hushed corners of their penthouse, and old acquaintances casting cryptic glances. Sophie used to dismiss these moments as the typical burdens of a man who managed vast sums of money and oversaw multiple business ventures. But ever since she became pregnant, her once hazy doubts grew clearer. She recalled how, during her first ultrasound appointment, Adrian had been uncharacteristically distant. He'd stood close, holding her hand, but every time his phone vibrated, he would start as if expecting dire news. When she pressed him about it, he brushed it off with a terse statement about market fluctuations and disruptive competitors. Sophie had tried to be understanding. Billionaires had billion-dollar problems, after all. But the final straw, the moment everything shifted, came that morning when she discovered he'd left his email open on the living room laptop. She wasn't the prying type, but a suspicious subject line flashed across the screen. Confirmed flight itinerary for Adrian Caldwell, 2 passengers. Her heart pounded the way it does when you realize you're about to read something that will change your life. It was an elaborate trip to Greece, first-class flights, a week-long reservation at a 5-star resort along the Santorini coast, romantic candlelit dinners, exclusive tours, and spa appointments. 2 people. Every detail was hammered out, from private car service to couples massages. Only Sophie wasn't part of that itinerary. Her name didn't appear anywhere in those confirmations. Instead, there was a second passenger, Juliette Larocque, a name she had never heard Adrian mention. Sophie felt her palms go clammy, reading the lines over and over until the letters blurred. Why had her husband booked a lavish Greek getaway with someone else and hidden it from his pregnant wife? The question consumed her, swirling up every insecurity she'd tried to bury. Her hands shook as she stood from the laptop, fear tangling with anger. A voice in her head tried to reason that perhaps it was business, a philanthropic project, or maybe a misunderstanding, but something deeper in her gut told her the unspoken truth was much darker. And so, in that moment, Sophie Caldwell resolved to find out exactly what was going on, even if it meant risking the beautiful life she and Adrian had built. She took a shaky breath, shutting the laptop with trembling fingers. Her mind roared with 1,000 questions, but one drowned out all others. Who was Juliette Larocque? Early that afternoon, Sophie left the penthouse under the pretense of a prenatal yoga session and instead headed straight for her best friend's loft in Lincoln Park. Her friend, Tessa Monroe, had known Sophie since their days at the University of Minnesota. They were both scholarship students, scrounging up coins for cheap pizza slices while finishing studio design projects. Tessa, with her spiky lavender hair and tattooed arms, was an unconventional figure who never hesitated to speak her mind. Inside the loft, Sophie's eyes welled up the instant Tessa opened the door. She could still hear the echo of her own heartbeat from the morning's discovery. Tessa guided her to the plush couch, offering a warm cup of tea. Once Sophie explained the situation, Adrian's email, the lavish trip to Greece, and the unknown woman, Tessa's jaw clenched. "Have you talked to him about it?" Tessa asked gently, placing a hand on Sophie's knee. Sophie shook her head. "He's had a business meeting all day, and I'm scared. What if I'm just overreacting?" The words tumbled out in a breathless rush. Tessa's face became a portrait of concern. "Soph, sweetie, that's definitely suspicious. I know you want to believe there's a valid explanation, but an itinerary for 2 to Greece? That's not just a business lunch, especially if this woman's name has never come up." "I know. That's what terrifies me," Sophie whispered, bowing her head. "We've been so happy, or at least I thought so. Now I'm wondering what else I've missed. All those times he was traveling for business, the phone calls he ended abruptly." Tessa listened intently, her expression shifting between sympathy and anger. She reached for her phone. "We can try to find out who Juliette Larocque is," she offered. "Sometimes a quick search can reveal a lot." Sophie nodded, biting her lip as she watched Tessa type furiously. Within minutes, Tessa's brows furrowed into a perplexed scowl. "There's a Juliette Larocque who runs a high-end boutique in Paris, another who's a freelance journalist in Toronto, but I'm not seeing anything that clearly ties to Adrian, at least not on the surface. Let me check social media." A few more minutes passed. Sophie felt each second stretching painfully, as if time itself was mocking her. Then Tessa's eyebrows lifted. "I found a Juliette Larocque who liked to post about Adrian's last acquisition on the GBC network. Her profile's locked, but the picture is a silhouette of a woman standing beside a yacht. Her bio is minimal, just says she lives in Monaco. That's it." Sophie's chest tightened. Monaco. Adrian had traveled to Monaco just 5 months ago, shortly before she found out she was pregnant. She remembered how quickly he jetted off, citing a sudden invitation to a philanthropic event in Monte Carlo. She'd wanted to go with him, but Adrian insisted she stay and rest after a rough spell of morning sickness. The memory flooded back with vivid clarity. The way he had kissed her forehead before leaving, how he'd promised to call every night, how she had stood at the window, watching his car disappear into traffic. At the time, she had felt guilty for needing him, for even asking to go. Now that moment felt different. Calculated, hollow. Had he been lying even then? Tessa exhaled a slow breath. This might be a huge coincidence, but it's fishy. If this Juliette is from Monaco, that lines up with Adrian's trip. Maybe they met there. Sophie's fingers clenched around her teacup. There was a sudden hollowness in her chest, as if something sacred had been punctured. The idea that a name on a screen, a city she'd never stepped foot in, could unravel her entire reality was too much to bear. Her mind raced to rationalize, to cling to logic, but her instincts screamed louder. Sophie's eyes blurred with tears. She tried to think of any possible innocent reason for him to invite a woman from Monaco on a romantic Greek getaway. It was possible. He had wealthy foreign investors. It was possible. She was just a business associate. But then, why keep it from Sophie? She stood abruptly, nearly spilling her tea. I need to talk to him. I can't jump to conclusions, but I can't ignore it either, Tessa. Will you promise to back me up if they turn ugly? You know I will, Tessa said softly, pulling Sophie into a tight hug. No matter what, you have me. Armed with that promise, Sophie left Tessa's loft. She hailed a cab back to the penthouse, heart pounding at the thought of confronting her husband. Yet when she arrived home, the silent emptiness pressed in on her. The living room was as immaculate as ever, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Chicago skyline, modern art pieces on the walls, and a glass coffee table where the laptop still sat. Adrian's meeting would run late, so she had hours to kill with her spiraling thoughts. She paced from room to room. She lingered in the nursery they'd begun decorating, her hand drifting protectively over her growing belly. She had envisioned so many precious moments, reading bedtime stories, singing lullabies within these softly painted walls. Would those dreams vanish? Amid the swirl of heartbreak, a steely determination emerged. If Adrian was betraying her, she needed to know. And if there was a logical explanation, she deserved to hear it. She whispered to the baby within, as if the unborn child could somehow anchor her in the storm. We'll figure this out together. Time crawled. At last, around 9 in the evening, Adrian returned home. Sophie saw him step into the foyer, shoulders slumped with apparent exhaustion. He loosened his tie and offered a soft smile when he spotted her waiting in the living room. Hey, love, he murmured, leaning in for a kiss. She only half returned it. We need to talk, she said quietly, gesturing for him to sit. She noticed a flicker of unease cross his face, but he quickly masked it. Sure. Everything okay? He settled onto the plush couch, setting his phone aside, face guarded. Sophie's heart hammered. She sat across from him, eyeing the laptop that had betrayed his secret. But a wave of guilt flooded through her. What if she was wrong? What if Adrian truly had an innocent explanation? Her mind reeled. I must approach this carefully. I saw an email today, she began, voice trembling. Your email was open, a flight itinerary for 2 to Greece, with someone named Juliette Larocque. Adrian's eyes flared with shock, and something else. Fear. Just for a split second. He said nothing. Then he cleared his throat, adopting the polished, confident tone he used in business negotiations. I can explain, he said softly, reaching for her hand. It's not what you think. Sophie pulled back. She felt anger swirl. So tell me, because right now it looks like you're planning a secret romantic vacation with another woman. He inhaled deeply, clearly organizing his thoughts. She's an old acquaintance, he said slowly, holding Sophie's gaze. She's in a situation with her family's estate in Greece. Her father passed away recently, and he left some land along the Santorini coast. She asked me for business advice, maybe even some financial partnership. I offered to meet her there and see the property. That's it. Sophie frowned. Then why keep it hidden from me? Why did you never mention her before? I wasn't sure if I was actually going. You asked, Adrian said, his voice steady, though his eyes flicked nervously. I didn't want to worry you or drag you into a messy situation. This is complicated. It involves inheritance disputes and local politics. Plus, you're pregnant. The last thing you need is stress. I planned to tell you once I'd finalized my decision. The itinerary you saw, it was just a preliminary booking. Her mind struggled between the comfort of his earnest tone and the leftover suspicion gnawing at her. So you're telling me it's purely professional? He nodded. Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. He glanced down, then placed a gentle hand on her stomach. Sophie, I love you. I wouldn't do anything to jeopardize what we have, especially with our baby on the way. A wave of relief fought against skepticism. His explanation was plausible. He was known to partner with people who had unique assets or properties, and if Juliette was from Monaco or somewhere else in Europe, maybe they had stayed in touch after a philanthropic event. Yet something about the conversation felt rehearsed. The mention of a father's estate, local politics, inheritance disputes. These were plausible bullet points, but his entire manner reeked of carefully chosen words. Sophie decided to probe further. Show me the property details, or the email thread. If it's all above board, I'd feel better seeing it. She braced herself for him to get defensive, but instead, Adrian gave a slow, measured nod. I will. Just not tonight. I'm exhausted. Let's go to bed, and tomorrow I'll put everything on the table. I promise. His tone was firm, yet gentle, and something in Sophie wilted under the fatigue of the day. She hated the turmoil inside her, especially with the baby. She decided that another night wouldn't change the facts, so she gave a small nod, letting him lead her into their bedroom. He held her close, whispering sweet words about how they would get through anything together. But as she drifted off, a single question looped in her mind. Was he telling her the truth, or merely stalling? Morning brought a new wave of resolve. Sophie would not let this lie. But Adrian had left before dawn, apparently called into an urgent meeting. He left a note promising to return for lunch so they could talk. No time to show her documents. No moment to reassure her with tangible evidence. As she restlessly walked through the apartment, her phone buzzed with a text from Tessa. Any news? Did he confess? Sophie's stomach nodded. She typed back a quick summary of Adrian's explanation, acknowledging she still felt uneasy. Tessa's reply was swift. Let's dig deeper. I have a contact who might help. Attached was a business card for a private investigator named Benjamin Chase. He was apparently a friend of Tessa's cousin, known for his discretion and effectiveness. Sophie stared at the name, torn between loyalty to her husband and an unshakable fear that he was hiding more. She typed, "Let me think about it." She spent the next few hours pacing, rereading the flight confirmation email. A single damning detail stood out. The booking mentioned a romantic ocean view suite. That phrase hammered relentlessly at her. Would a purely professional meeting involve a suite that came with a private hot tub and a champagne welcome package? She tried to rationalize. Maybe it was the only suite available, or maybe Adrian had been automatically upgraded, but the doubt refused to loosen its grip. Finally, after an hour of near anguish, Sophie dialed Benjamin Chase's number. Benjamin Chase's office was not the smoky, dim-lit cliché Sophie expected from detective dramas. It was a clean, sun-dappled space in a West Loop building, with light wood floors and a single potted plant near the corner window. Benjamin himself was a tall man in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair and sharp, kind eyes. He greeted Sophie and Tessa warmly, offering them each a seat. Sophie hesitated, feeling a pang of guilt. She still loved Adrian deeply, and hiring a private investigator felt like a monumental betrayal. But the memory of that romantic suite hovered like a neon sign in her mind. It felt like stepping across a threshold she could never return from. Just dialing the number had made her hands tremble. And now, sitting across from a stranger who held the power to confirm her worst fears, her entire body buzzed with a quiet panic. Her heart screamed for reassurance, but her instincts clutched at truth. I understand you have questions about your husband's recent travel plans, Benjamin said, leaning back in his chair. Before we proceed, I want to assure you that anything you share remains confidential. No one will know you've spoken to me, unless you choose to tell them. Sophie swallowed hard, nodding. I just need the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Benjamin nodded, empathy flickering in his eyes. Then let's begin. Tell me what you know so far. She recounted everything: Adrian's suspicious itinerary, the name Juliette Larocque, the alleged business venture, and her husband's carefully measured explanation. Tessa chimed in, mentioning their limited social media search results. Benjamin listened intently, jotting down notes with neat penmanship. When Sophie finished, Benjamin tapped his pen against the notepad. I can do a deeper dive. Financial records, property ownership, previous travel logs. If Juliette Larocque is affiliated with anything shady, or if there's a personal connection your husband isn't disclosing, I'll find it. Tessa nodded in approval. Sophie exhaled, whispering, All right, let's do this. They agreed on a retainer fee, and Benjamin promised to start immediately. As Sophie stood to leave, her stomach churned with a mix of apprehension and relief. She had taken the first step toward uncovering the truth, and there would be no turning back. Outside the building, the city moved as it always did. Cars honking, people talking, life rushing forward. But Sophie felt suspended, as though she stood still while the world blurred past. Tessa gave Sophie's hand a comforting squeeze. You did the right thing. Even if Adrian's telling the truth, it's better to verify. Sophie offered a shaky smile, hugging her friend. Thank you for being here. I hope this is all some misunderstanding. Later that afternoon, Sophie returned to the penthouse to find Adrian's note on the kitchen counter. Emergency meeting at the bank. Might be home late. Love you. Her heart sank. Another delay, another excuse. She ran her fingers over the smooth marble countertop. She could almost feel the distance growing between them, a chasm that threatened to swallow her marriage whole. She wandered into her home office. Work had been a welcome refuge in recent days. She still occasionally took on freelance design projects, though she'd scaled back since pregnancy fatigue had set in. Today, she opened her design software, trying to sketch out a new logo for a local boutique. Yet her mind refused to focus. She kept staring at the blank screen, thoughts drifting to all the possible scenarios. The cursor blinked against a white canvas like a quiet accusation. She hadn't completed a single project in weeks. Her fingers hovered over the keys, then fell uselessly to her lap. The creative spark that once defined her felt dimmed, dulled by exhaustion, heartbreak, and a gnawing sense of failure she couldn't shake. What if Adrian was in love with Juliet? What if he wanted to build a life with her in Europe? Was Sophie just a convenient wife, a trophy to show off at galas and charity events? No, that didn't make sense. He had been so supportive, so loving. She pressed her eyes shut, remembering the moment he discovered she was pregnant. He had laughed and cried at the same time, scooping her into his arms. He had kissed her belly then, whispered promises about being the best father possible, about building a life full of bedtime stories and Sunday morning pancakes. She'd believed him. How could she not? His tears had soaked into her hair, and she'd felt safe in that moment, more than ever before. Could that have been an act? By evening, Adrian still hadn't returned. Sophie ate a light dinner alone, picking at her food. Her phone chimed, revealing a text from Adrian. Going to finish late. Stay in bed. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Anger flared. How many tomorrows would there be before he'd actually laid everything on the table? She typed out a curt reply. Fine. Good night. Then she slammed the phone down, feeling tears brim. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Adrian left early, stayed out late, and gave Sophie short, comforting lines, without presenting any hard evidence. He claimed he was finalizing a major deal. She was left to doubt, to pace, to wonder if hiring a private investigator was her only lifeline. Late one night, while Adrian was in the shower, she noticed his phone on the nightstand. A single message lit the screen, too quick to read. Temptation seized her, and she picked it up. Locks. She swallowed hard, realizing how far she'd fallen, snooping through a phone she once respected as off-limits. She set it back down, guilt coursing through her. Yet desperation had its own gravity, pulling her deeper into an unfamiliar darkness. She was a wife on the brink, a mother-to-be clinging to the remains of a life that might be an illusion. In that dim bedroom, with nothing but the soft hum of the shower in the distance, Sophie felt more alone than she ever had before. She whispered into the empty room, "Please, let this be a misunderstanding, please." About a week later, Benjamin Chase called Sophie with his preliminary findings. His tone was tense as he asked her to meet him at his office immediately. Her stomach lurched. She hurriedly texted Adrian, letting him know she was running errands, though she doubted he would even notice. Inside Benjamin's office, the air felt heavier than before. He closed the door, motioning for her to take a seat across from his desk. "Sophie, I've done extensive digging. I want you to brace yourself." Her heart thundered. She clenched her hands in her lap. "Just tell me." Benjamin nodded, flipping open a manila folder. "I confirm that Juliet Larocque is indeed a Monaco resident. 29 years old. No immediate family in that region. She's originally from the U.S., but relocated after a significant inheritance. I found no direct link to a Greek family estate or any father's land in Santorini. In fact, her father passed away years ago, leaving her a sizable trust, but no property in Greece." Sophie's breath caught. That directly contradicted Adrian's entire explanation. She felt tears sting, but she forced herself to keep listening. Benjamin continued. "Furthermore, Juliet's social media and digital footprint show multiple visits to luxury destinations: Paris, Dubai, London, Hong Kong, often overlapping with your husband's business travel schedules. Same approximate dates, same cities. I've cross-referenced flight records. Adrian's private jet or corporate flights he's listed on frequently land in these cities around the same time she's there. Her vision blurred, chest constricting. He's been with her. She fought to remain composed. So, they've been traveling together? Or at least traveling to the same places all this time? He nodded gravely. It appears so. I also checked local property records in Monaco. There's no estate in Greece under her name. She's not dealing with inheritance issues. She's living quite lavishly, though. My guess is that your husband may be financing her lifestyle. Sophie thought she might be sick. The revelation pummeled her. All the times Adrian insisted he was traveling for urgent business or philanthropic causes, he could have been gallivanting with this woman. Her mind reeled. Was their entire marriage a sham? Benjamin's voice softened. I'm sorry. I know this is devastating. I wanted to give you the facts before digging deeper. You can decide how to proceed. She let out a shaky exhale, tears slipping free despite her efforts. Thank you, she whispered. I need more information. I need to be absolutely sure. Is there any proof of an affair? He pursed his lips. Hard evidence, like photographs of them together, will take more time. But from her social media, it's clear she's frequently stayed at the same luxury hotels where Adrian has bookings, like the Four Seasons in Paris last spring, Claridge's in London 6 months ago, the yacht in Monaco. There's enough circumstantial evidence to draw a conclusion. Sophie dug her nails into her palm, trying to control the wave of panic. She forced herself to ask, could it be a business arrangement? Some kind of sponsorship deal? Benjamin shook his head gently. That's possible, but unlikely. The nature of the hotel suites and their timing suggests something more personal. If you want photographic proof, I can assign someone to follow them or gather direct evidence, but it's entirely your call. She stared at the folder, at the jumble of flight logs, names, and dates. In her mind's eye, she saw Adrian's bright smile when he'd first asked her out to dinner. The promise in his voice at their wedding ceremony when he vowed fidelity and respect. She wanted to tear those memories to shreds, to bury them beneath the betrayal. Her hand drifted to her stomach. The baby kicked lightly, as if sensing her turmoil. It brought a wave of grief so overwhelming that she had to take several deep breaths. Go ahead, she finally managed. I need the full truth. Benjamin reached across the desk, placing a reassuring hand near hers. I'll do my best to keep you updated. You deserve the facts. Leaving the office, Sophie felt as though the city's towering skyline loomed ominously, mocking her heartbreak. She stumbled onto the sidewalk, tears burning her cheeks. Tessa was waiting across the street at a cafe, and when Sophie saw her friend's worried face, she broke into guttural sobs. Tessa raced over, cradling Sophie in a fierce hug. It's real, Sophie managed, choking on tears. He's been lying, maybe for years. All those trips, all those nights he was away. Tessa cupped her face, furious with protective rage. That bastard. I swear, if he hurts you or the baby. Sophie pulled away, her voice shaky but resolute. I need to confront him. But I want to be smart about this. I want more evidence, so he can't gaslight me, so he can't spin another story. Tessa nodded, pushing Sophie's hair back from her tear-streaked face. You're stronger than you think, Soph. We'll get through this together. That night, Sophie paced the penthouse, waiting for Adrian. But again, he came home late, claiming exhaustion. She forced herself to swallow the accusations, not wanting a half-baked confrontation without undeniable proof. Her heart thundered in her chest and anger heated her blood. The next morning, he was gone before she awoke. Thus began the longest, most agonizing waiting game of Sophie Caldwell's life. Over the next 2 weeks, Benjamin worked tirelessly. He sent Sophie text updates in coded language to maintain secrecy. One evening, he finally requested another meeting, this time in a small cafe, away from prying eyes. Sophie slipped out during midday, telling Adrian she had a doctor's appointment, though she doubted he even cared enough to ask for details. At the cafe's back corner table, Benjamin placed a small envelope before her. Photographs, he explained gently, and some corresponding receipts. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. The first photograph showed Adrian stepping off a private jet in Naples, Italy, wearing a crisp linen shirt. Beside him, hand in hand, was a stunning brunette. Her hair framed elegant features, Juliet without a doubt. They looked every bit like a couple on a romantic getaway. The next photo showed them entering a five-star hotel, sharing a laugh, heads close together. Another captured them dining on a restaurant terrace overlooking the sea. In some pictures, Adrian's arm encircled her waist. In one, his lips pressed to her temple. Each image struck like a dagger. Sophie's breath hitched, and her visions swam. These weren't just random snapshots. They were stolen moments, intimate rituals that should have belonged to her. She felt her throat tighten as the contrast hit. The man who kissed her forehead goodnight now kissed another woman's skin under Mediterranean sunsets. A cold numbness wrapped around Sophie's mind. She had suspected this, but seeing it spelled out in color photographs was like a blow to the chest. The final piece was a receipt, labeled Couples Spa Package, listing both their names, with Adrian's credit card on file. Benjamin gave her time to absorb the images. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. They arrived in Naples 3 days ago and then headed to the coast together. They're scheduled to leave tomorrow. I didn't want to overwhelm you with live updates, but I felt you needed proof. Sophie stared at the faces in the photographs. The man who had promised her loyalty, the father of the child growing in her womb. He was standing intimately with another woman. The sharp betrayal pierced every tender memory, every promise, every kiss that once made her feel cherished. The foundation of her life cracked open. She felt her world crumble, the last vestiges of hope turning to dust. "My God," she whispered, as the tears came again. Blurring the photos, she whispered, "He's with her. Right now." Benjamin cleared his throat, sympathetic but professional. "Yes, they've been there for a few days." Rage bubbled beneath Sophie's grief. Adrian had told her he was swamped with meetings, that he was across the country dealing with urgent business. He was out of the country, enjoying a romantic holiday with Juliet. Sophie forced herself to breathe. She looked to Benjamin. "What else do you know about Juliet? Is this her first time traveling with him while I've been pregnant?" He flipped through his notes. "She accompanied him to London about 4 months ago, soon after you announced your pregnancy. Before that, they were in Dubai together for New Year's." There's a pattern. His eyes were full of regret as he delivered the news. "I'm sorry." Sophie closed her eyes, her body trembling with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. The scale of his betrayal was staggering. This wasn't a one-time lapse of judgment. It was an ongoing affair, woven into the fabric of his life for months, possibly years. A question churned in her mind. How could I have missed this? She remembered every hush over the phone, every canceled date night, every surprise business trip. She had tried to be the supportive wife, never suspecting she was enabling Adrian's web of lies. Then a stronger thought emerged. What do I do now? She was pregnant. Financially supported by him, though she had her own savings, thanks to Adrian's generosity early in their relationship. But the prospect of leaving him felt like stepping off a cliff. Benjamin spoke softly, as if reading her thoughts. "You're not alone. You have legal options. Prenuptial agreements can be contested in cases of infidelity, depending on the jurisdiction. If you need a lawyer, I can recommend someone, highly discreet. Also, therapy might help you navigate the emotional toll." Sophie nodded numbly, clasping the envelope of photos. "Thank you. Let me figure out my next steps." She pushed back her chair and hurried from the cafe, the envelope held tight against her chest. Outside, the bustling city carried on. People chatted. Horns honked. Tourists snapped pictures. No one noticed the pregnant woman who had just discovered her world was built on deception. She took a shaky breath and texted Tessa. "He's in Italy. With her. I have proof. I need to see you." Tessa wasted no time. She invited Sophie to her loft that evening. Over steaming mugs of herbal tea, Sophie spread the photos across the coffee table. Tessa's expression darkened as she flipped through them. "I can't believe this. I want to wring his neck," she hissed. Sophie wiped fresh tears. "All this time, I feel like a fool." He was living a double life, wasn't he? Tessa set the photos down gently, wrapping an arm around Sophie's shoulders. "Listen, you're not a fool. You trusted the man you love. He's the one who's a liar and a cheat." Her voice softened. "What do you want to do now?" Sophie stared at the pictures, her future flashing in her mind like a broken reel. She imagined confronting Adrian, the lies he would spin. She pictured the baby's future. Would her child grow up in a broken home? Or trapped in a loveless marriage? She thought of all the humiliating stares at social events if the scandal became public. The thought of strangers whispering, of forced smiles at charity galas, of polite nods hiding cruel judgment, it made her chest tighten. Her child didn't deserve to be the object of sympathy or gossip, born into a family stitched together by silence and betrayal. Slowly, she shook her head. I can't stay silent. I don't want to just let him pretend everything is normal. But I need to protect myself and the baby. If I leave him, I have to do it on my own terms. Tessa nodded. I'll be with you every step. Have you thought about meeting with a lawyer? Sophie swallowed hard. I guess I should. We did sign a prenup, but I never thought I'd have to rely on it. Adrian insisted it was a formality. I don't even remember every clause. I was so naive. She recalled the day they signed the papers, just before their lavish wedding in Lake Geneva. Adrian's lawyers had presented a thick folder of legalese. Adrian reassured her it was standard procedure for someone of his financial standing. Sophie, blinded by love, had barely glanced at the details, trusting him completely. She'd sat across from two suited men she didn't know, nodding along as they used words she didn't fully understand. Her own legal counsel had felt more like a formality, one rushed call and a signature on the dotted line. At the time, she had been too proud to ask questions, too eager to prove she wasn't after Adrian's money. She had smiled through it all, signing page after page, telling herself that love didn't need protection, that their bond was stronger than contracts. Now she cursed that blind faith. She prayed now that she hadn't signed away her rights in the event of an affair. Yes, she said firmly. I'll call Benjamin in the morning and get that recommendation. It's time for me to know exactly where I stand. Tessa nodded, resolute. Good. And in the meantime, come stay with me, if you feel unsafe or just need space. Sophie's eyes welled again, but this time with gratitude. I might take you up on that. Thank you for everything. In the coming days, a fierce sense of resolve took hold in Sophie's heart. While Adrian was away in Italy, she scheduled a meeting with the attorney Benjamin recommended, Claudia White, a sharp, no-nonsense woman known for handling high-profile divorce cases. Sophie walked into Claudia's office with steel in her spine, determined to protect her unborn child and salvage some dignity. Claudia listened carefully, eyes scanning the photos, the flight itineraries, and the suspicious financial documents Sophie had managed to gather. You have a strong case, Claudia said, tapping a manicured nail on a damning photo of Adrian and Juliet kissing on a yacht. If the prenup includes an infidelity clause, and many do, this can significantly alter the divorce settlement. We'll need to review the entire prenup text, of course, but from an outsider's perspective, your husband engaged in a long-term extramarital affair. Judges don't look kindly on that, especially with a pregnant spouse at home. Sophie felt both relief and sorrow. What about custody? I don't want to bar him from seeing his child. But I do want to make sure the baby and I are taken care of. Claudia nodded. Custody is a separate matter from the financial settlement, but the affair can influence the final outcome if we can show irresponsibility or an unstable family environment. She paused, then continued. However, courts generally favor joint custody unless there's abuse or neglect. Still, your baby isn't even born yet, which complicates things. My advice is, gather everything, keep calm, and proceed with caution. Do not let him suspect you're preparing for legal action until we have a solid plan. Sophie left Claudia's office feeling strangely empowered. Yes, her heart still ached, but now she had direction, a path toward securing her future. She returned to the penthouse, fully expecting it to be empty. Instead, she was startled to find Adrian in the kitchen, humming as he poured wine into a crystal glass. He spun around when she walked in, face lighting up with a broad smile. Hey, beautiful, he greeted, as if everything were perfectly normal. I thought you might be out, so I picked up dinner. He gestured to a fancy paper bag with the logo of an upscale Italian restaurant. Sophie's stomach twisted at the name, the same place they used to celebrate anniversaries and special occasions. Her eyes flicked over him. He wore casual clothing and a fresh tan from the sunny Amalfi Coast. She felt revulsion coil inside her. He was carrying on as though he hadn't just been gallivanting across Europe with another woman. How was your trip? She asked tightly, removing her coat with forced casualness. He poured another glass, presumably for her. Grueling. We're getting close to finalizing this property deal, but there's still a mountain of paperwork. His expression was so convincing, so calm, that it nearly took her breath away. Sophie crossed her arms, voice trembling. So, you were away on business the whole time? He nodded slowly, not missing a beat. Yeah, you know how these negotiations go. Then he leaned in, pressing a kiss to her cheek. She froze, a roil of anger making her want to slap him. But she held back, forcing a neutral mask. Right, she whispered, pulling away. I'm just gonna wash up. We'll talk in a bit. She turned on her heel, ignoring his confused expression. In the bathroom, she stared at her reflection. The swirl of betrayal, heartbreak, and rage etched on her features. He was lying to her face, confident she remained clueless. He had no idea she possessed photographic evidence of his infidelity. For a fleeting moment, she wanted to confront him right then, wave the pictures in his face. But Claudia's advice echoed in her mind. Do not let him suspect you're preparing for legal action. Taking a steadying breath, Sophie decided to play his game a little longer, to gather every piece of leverage she might need. He might be a master manipulator, but I won't be his victim any longer. In the days that followed, Sophie played the role of a compliant wife. She responded to Adrian's affectionate gestures with forced smiles, withheld her accusations, and carefully avoided any outbursts. The tension inside her coiled tighter with each passing hour. Ironically, Adrian seemed more devoted than ever, as if trying to soothe any suspicion. He brought home flowers, asked about her pregnancy cravings, even started reading baby books. Gestures that might have thrilled her a month ago, now only fanned the flames of anger. And yet, there were moments, small, fleeting ones, when her resolve faltered, when he bent over her belly and whispered to their unborn child, or when he chuckled softly at a passage in a parenting book and read it aloud to her with boyish excitement. In those moments, Sophie's heart would ache not just from betrayal, but from longing, for the man she thought he was, for the family she had once imagined. Sophie continued her secret meetings with Claudia, who meticulously reviewed the prenup. As it turned out, there was an infidelity clause, a somewhat standard inclusion that Adrian's lawyers had clearly overlooked in their arrogance. If proven, the affair could entitle Sophie to a significant financial settlement and possible ownership of certain marital assets. One early morning, Sophie found Adrian in the nursery, gazing at the crib they had picked out together. She stood in the doorway, heart throbbing with conflicting emotions. Despite everything, a part of her still remembered the man she fell in love with, the one who had seemed so genuine and kind. It hurt to see him there, wearing a look of tender longing. For a brief second, she wanted to believe it was real, that the way he brushed his fingers along the crib rail, the softness in his eyes, wasn't part of a performance. That maybe, deep down, he still cared in the right ways. But then, she recalled the photographs of him tangling his arms around Juliet. The ache in her chest sharpened, fueling her resolve. He made his choice. As her plan to leave him solidified, Sophie confided in only two people, Tessa and Benjamin. Tessa helped her discreetly gather personal belongings and sentimental items from the penthouse, packing them into boxes that she stored at Tessa's loft. She retrieved important documents, heirloom jewelry, and private diaries she'd kept over the years. Meanwhile, Benjamin was on standby, ready to assist if Adrian discovered her plans prematurely. Finally, a day came when Claudia told her, "We're ready to file. But it might be wise to confront him first. You can gauge his reaction. If he tries to threaten or manipulate you, we'll proceed immediately." Sophie's stomach churned. She was terrified of the confrontation. Adrian was cunning, a seasoned negotiator. He could twist words, evoke pity, or fling blame. But she couldn't hide forever. That evening, she sat at her vanity mirror, hands shaking as she rehearsed what she might say. She felt the baby kick again, a reminder that she must remain strong. That night, she found Adrian in his study, scrolling through his phone with a glass of whiskey beside him. She inhaled a steadying breath before stepping inside. "Adrian, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. He looked up, smiling faintly, though a flicker of concern crossed his eyes. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Sophie closed the door, her heart pounding as though it might burst free. She forced herself to hold his gaze. "I know about Italy. And about Juliet. I know everything. A thick silence followed. Adrian's expression froze, slowly morphing into one of calculated shock. I don't understand, he stammered. But she saw it, the glimmer of panic beneath his attempted composure. Her throat constricted, tears threatening, but she hardened her voice. I hired a private investigator. I have pictures, flight logs, receipts, all of it, so please, don't bother lying anymore. His mouth opened, then closed. He set his phone down, the corners of his mouth tightening. Sophie's voice was cold and steady as she spoke. Let me explain. She cut him off with a raised hand. No, you've had plenty of chances to explain. You lied to my face, not once, but repeatedly, while I was pregnant with your child. Adrian stood, attempting to approach her, but Sophie stepped back. It wasn't. It's not as simple as you think, he whispered, as though struggling to find the right words. I never meant to hurt you. Sophie's composure cracked. Tears slid down her cheeks. You never meant to hurt me? Then why were you in a romantic suite with another woman? Why did you travel the world with her? Why did you tell me you were away on business while you were really with her? His voice choked. I was confused, Soph. There were things about our marriage, about the baby. I felt pressured, suffocated. Sophie spat, anger taking over. You left me alone in this penthouse, pregnant and scared, while you frolicked with Juliet. Her voice broke. How dare you blame me for your affair? He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting as he searched for a foothold. I'm sorry. I know it looks terrible, but I do love you. Stop, Sophie hissed, feeling months of pain condense into that single word. I'm done. I'm leaving you, and I'm filing for divorce. She watched the color drain from his face. Divorce? He edged forward, lowering his voice. Think about the baby. Think about our family, our future. We can fix this. I'll end it with Juliet, I swear. Just give me a chance to make this right. Sophie shook her head, tears slipping freely. You had all the chances in the world. I begged you to tell me what was wrong. You gaslit me, made me question my own sanity. I won't stay in a marriage built on lies. This ends now. Adrian's jaw clenched for a moment. Genuine desperation shone in his eyes, but it quickly hardened into anger. You can't just leave. You need me financially. Think about it. I control everything. He stepped closer, his voice low. You're pregnant, Soph. Where will you go? How will you manage? Sophie met his gaze, steel forging in her spine. I'm not the naive girl you married, Adrian. I have representation. There's an infidelity clause in our prenup. You should read it sometime. He flinched, shock crossing his features. Then his shoulders sagged. Sophie, let's not do anything rash. We can talk, see a therapist, whatever it takes. I messed up, but I don't want to lose you. Sophie's voice shook with finality. It's too late. She turned on her heel, ignoring the tremor in her limbs. I'll be at Tessa's, she said quietly. My lawyer will be in touch. Adrian called her name, but she didn't stop. She collected the overnight bag she'd prepared weeks ago and walked out the door, tears blurring her vision. The elevator ride down felt like an eternity. When the doors opened onto the lobby, she took a deep breath, stepping into the crisp night air. As a newly freed woman, albeit one with a shattered heart. Every breath stung. Every step away from the man she once saw as her forever felt both empowering and excruciating. But in that pain, there was clarity. She wasn't just walking away from a marriage. She was walking toward herself. The divorce proceedings were swift in the public eye, yet agonizingly slow for Sophie. The tabloids caught wind of Adrian Caldwell's scandal, splashing headlines like "Billionaire's secret affair exposed" and "Pregnant wife walks out." Despite the invasive coverage, Sophie shielded herself behind Claudia's legal expertise, refusing to comment publicly. Adrian attempted to reconcile privately, offering elaborate gifts and heartfelt pleas for forgiveness. He insisted he'd break things off with Juliet and that they could raise the baby together. But Sophie's resolve stayed firm. The betrayal had run too deep, the trust beyond repair. She didn't scream. She didn't rage. She simply let the legal documents speak for her. In the end, the prenup's infidelity clause gave Sophie a comfortable financial settlement, enough to secure a new home in a peaceful neighborhood close to Tessa. She focused on her pregnancy, determined to create a loving environment for her child, far from the deceit that had once tainted her life. On a calm autumn evening, Sophie went into labor. Tessa rushed her to the hospital, and a few intense hours later, Sophie held her newborn son in her arms. She cried tears of joy and sorrow, wishing her marriage had remained the fairy tale she once believed in. Still, as she held him close, the weight of everything she'd endured seemed to melt beneath the warmth of his skin. He was her redemption, her reason. The soft inhale and exhale of a new life resting against her chest reminded her that despite the ruins of her past, something pure had survived. Still, she promised her son he'd never feel the lack of love in his life. Sometimes late at night, Sophie recalled the swirl of illusions she'd once lived in. But each morning, she woke to see her son's wide eyes gazing up at her, reminding her of the new chapter she'd forged. A chapter no longer steeped in lies, but in strength, hope, and the promise of a fresh start. Lives can hinge on a single discovery, a hidden itinerary, a glimpse of the truth. Sophie Caldwell learned the hardest way possible that even picture-perfect marriages can hide devastating secrets. Yet in the ashes of betrayal, she found the courage to rebuild, proving that love for oneself and one's child can ignite the strongest resolve. Dear friend, sometimes the hardest goodbye is the one we never thought we'd have to say. The kind that isn't loud or dramatic, but quiet, final, and necessary. Sophie's story reminds us of a truth the Stoics knew well. We are not in control of what others do, only how we choose to respond. Betrayal may shake the ground beneath us, but in rising, we rediscover the parts of ourselves we'd long silenced, the strength, the dignity, the unyielding clarity of self-worth. To walk away from what breaks us is not weakness, it is wisdom clothed in courage. If this story resonated with you, touched a place of truth in your own heart, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who may need it, and subscribing for more stories that honor life's toughest reckonings and quietest victories. Your support means the world.